bank is not towards a huge or transformative infrastructure development such as a huge irrigation land and a huge warehousing and the road networks that will go into the agricultural space. So that gap is there. We have seen Get Fund, which is supporting education. We are seeing Cocoa Board. We are seeing the Gold Board. And a number of funds that are allocated towards specific sectors. But there is no fund allocated towards the agricultural sector. And we have issues of climate change. And for example, if you take northern Ghana, which has only one production season, sometimes after June or July, if a farmer does not plant, he should forget it. Last year, there was an issue of delay in the rain. Most of the farmers lost more than 90%
of their crops. And they are not going to grow again until the following year, June or July. They are not planting. If you look at the population of Ghanaians in northern sector, and 70 to 80% of them being in agric, and they cannot produce, definitely when you are talking about economic transformation, it might only affect few people. So what do? There are a number of things that are going on that Honorable Minister can consider and accelerate and scale. There was an introduction of the enclave and cluster approach, where government is investing in strategic infrastructure. What we don't have in those enclave approach is what I call the agri-enablers. The agri-enablers, for example, if you want young people to go into agric, we provide funding for hostels in schools. And I keep saying that we are investing in the supply side of our labor force. But we are not investing much in the consumption side of our skilled labor. So now we have a good policy of giving tuition-free or fee-free for first-year tertiary students. Fantastic. What is the equivalent investment that we are making in the consumption of the skilled labor that will come out when we have supported these young people? Okay. And agric is one sector that employs most of the people, both in the peri-urban and urban areas. So investment in agricultural infrastructure and agri-enablers are critical for us. As for the private sector support, yes, we know there are schemes to support the private sector, but the heavy lifting, which if a private sector should add to its investment, automatically the benefit of that investment turns negative.
Okay.
It has to be borne by government.
Thank you.
And these are the areas that we will expect Honorable
Some
Minister to relook into the budget. In the big push, can there be big push for agric, big push for irrigation, big push for post-harvest systems?
3 years ago, we had the opportunity to do a study funded by the Danish Embassy, and we're looking at the post-harvest investment in selected commodities in Ghana. And we were amazed and at the same time disappointed. When we put values on our post-harvest losses, we did the study right away from Bolga up to Axim. The post-harvest loss for yam alone was over $300 million per annum. Post-harvest loss for yam alone was over $300 million per annum.
That's very significant. Let me just stop you there because
Okay.
we need, thank you very much for your comments. I think that was very comprehensive. Before the minister responds, and I think we want Honorable Gusitano as well to make some comments, let me come to Madam Nora Banaman. Just, you spoke about infrastructure, and I think industry, you're representing AGI here today. What do you think in the budget most, should I say, stood out for you representing industry? Because we see that over the last few years, industry hasn't grown that much as a sector. So was there anything in this year's budget that you think was positive or even, stood out to you for the industry sector?
Okay. May I crave your indulgence to make this comment?
Yes.
That we all know that Africa, including Ghana, supplies 50%, approximately 50% of the world's raw materials. And therefore, creating jobs and generating wealth in Ghana should not be a problem. But I know not all of us are Christians. As the Bible says, a great and effectual door is open unto us. Which is this door? In every region in Ghana are actually natural resources that we can add value to generate the jobs and the wealth that we want to generate. But then we inflict upon ourselves what we are going through.
How do we address this? It has to be a public and private sector partnership. And I feel that it begins each time with needed engagement, conversations. For instance, before any government draws a budget, there should be that deep dive, those critical conversations with the private sector. Because really, no economy can develop without the private sector. And AGI's expectation, and as we've done so many times, and if we go to most ministries, sitting on shelves are very critical contributions from the Association of Ghana Industries
to support Ghana's development agenda over the years. And what our expectation is that government after government must really show focus on the national more than what a manifesto may present itself to attract the votes of the people, or at least give the people the confidence that government cares enough about food on their table. Now, what stood out for me, or for AGI, when I say me, I'm talking about AGI. First of all, we are happy
that government has taken note of the importance of reducing expenditure. Over the years, we found ourselves crowded out of the financial markets,
making cost of borrowing so high that within a lot of factories, and let me assure all of us, that just as when I went into industry, into manufacturing, over 4 decades ago, when there was at least 140 factories in my sector, generating over 27,000 jobs, so are there factories in this country, manufacturing plants, that can supply every need of the Ghanaian. And most of them have excess manufacturing capacity. And it is so important that we look at how to make use of this. So critical. If we want to generate wealth, if we want to stabilize the cedi, if we want to address inflation. So we are happy to know that government has taken a serious look at reducing its expenditure. This will then bring down interest rates. We trust that it will lower interest rates and allow manufacturers, as in AGI. Now, when we talk about AGI, once upon a time, it was known as the Ghana Manufacturing Association because most of the membership are manufacturers. And if we look at our current needs, and if you visit factories, you would find that there are equipment that have been sitting idle that needs replacement. We need to retool. And also we need to modernize even the factory shells. And there's been talk about infrastructure. And yet, cost of finance is so high, has been so high, And thankfully, we now have Development Bank Ghana to give that long-term financing that is required for doing this. But it's been so high because government after government has crowded us out, and it was mentioned here about crowding us back in. That it's been difficult to replace equipment. It's been difficult to put our factories in such a shape that we are attractive enough to investors or buyers to do business with us. There is certification that is required to go on markets. So if government is taking a look at reducing or borrowing less by reducing its expenditure, if it's looking at the procurement activities
to reduce corruption, because we see that most of the corruption cases cited,
I think over 70% of it falls in that sector. So
Okay.
if government is going to look at all of this, it will allow those of us in the private sector, AGI, to borrow for less.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to stop you there. I want Honorable Gusitano to make a few comments because he's only here for a short time. If we can take a microphone to him, commenting on the 24-hour economy. With all that we've heard about the challenges in the agricultural sector, infrastructure, we've heard about manufacturing and how we can improve things there. Perhaps we can hear from Honorable Gusitano. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello? Thank you very much. I believe that the sensibility that agriculture has to be the anchor of any transformation agenda is a correct one. But it doesn't stop just at the primary production of agricultural goods, but basically the value-added processing. When Nora talks about the fact that a lot of manufacturing companies have capacity but are unable to utilize that capacity, a lot of it has to do not only with the unavailability of finance, but the unavailability of raw materials. So one of the critical components of the 24-hour economy and accelerated development program is basically to achieve food self-sufficiency and the surpluses arising from that to feed industry and also to feed the export pipeline. Not only from value-added industrial production, but also just primary products themselves, because there's a huge market out there for primary products. China imports 103 million tons of soybean every year from the United States. Ghana can export soybean not only to China, but to Southern Europe and to Northwest Europe, but particularly the crushing plants in Southern Europe after the Southern European crop is out in February. So there are opportunities. And one of the things that we have decided, looking at the total landscape in the short time that we've been working as a secretariat, is that there's a lot of things going on, agri-impact and so on. So what is missing is scale. And that is what we want to achieve. And in doing so, we've identified 6 value chains that we want to get the private sector to be fully funded to implement. Those value chains are basically, in terms of crops, soybean, because they provide not only milk, not only oil, they also provide feed, which then becomes an important component of the poultry industry. If you aggregate all these poultry imports and egg imports and so on, and maize imports and even soya meal imports, they add to the total food budget, which is a charge on our foreign exchange, by importing almost $2.4 billion of food every year. 2 days ago, I had the pleasure of addressing Parliament, and I tried to show them that the second and third largest imports in the food complex, which is about 2.4 billion, 350 million of that is what three people call eyemadia, intestines and offals. It's a reality. So clearly, we cannot transform this country on the basis of imported EMADIA. We have to find another way. And we're working with the private sector to look at these value chains and raise long-term capital that allows for growth and expansion. It is very difficult to transform any economy, build a solid agricultural base with 90-day working capital or 1-year capital. It's very difficult to do anything with anything interest rate that is in double digits. So fortunately, we are targeting 11.9% year-end average inflation. We have to push further down, because if you want people to expand and grow industry, utilize their total capacity, then you have to give them the space to grow. And you have to give them the pricing of the funds that allows them also to grow. So we have to deal with tenor and we have to deal with pricing. So what we in the 24-hour economy are doing in relation to the value chains that I have mentioned, agriculture, industry, machinery and technology, textiles and garments, and mindset development in terms of digital skills, and mainstreaming digital skills in the TVET program so that we are linked eventually to the BPO market. So Ghana is a destination of business process outsourcing. All of these value chains require capital, and that capital must be sourced from somewhere. Our intention and our objective is to source capital that is concessional and that allows for those who will be on the on-lending banks in Ghana to put a spread on it, taking into account the risk premium and whatever inflation environment we have, so that we don't end up at rates that are beyond 12% on the CD. And to be able to do that also, we have to work with the Bank of Ghana to hedge out the exchange risk. Finance is everything. You can have the greatest ideas in the world. You can have the wonderful raw materials in the ground. You can do nothing with them unless there's some financing intermediation. So for us, financing is very key. That's why we're working with two money center banks to try and access a $500 million on-lending facility that will allow for 2 to 10 years turnaround in terms of tenor. The fund itself will be for 30 years, so we can concessional funds have a cap of 30 years because of the reasons that Seth has explained. So 25 years, 5 years moratorium, and also funding that is basically priced in a way that we can achieve the 7 to 12% band, or even lower. The biggest problem we have, and I think Dan has mentioned it very clearly, is that in the agroecological zones that we want to roll out as part of the major intervention in the agri space and agri-industry space, the issue is how do you finance the infrastructure within those zones? How do you finance the irrigation? How do you finance the roads, the energy systems, and so on? Particularly because in the context that we have today, it's going to be very difficult for government to reverse the tariff regime and make it lower because of the legacy debts that it has. So we have to basically accelerate the green transition. What kind of incentives will allow us to accelerate the green transition in these zones and these agricultural parks that are going to be very key in expanding output in the soybean complex, in the cassava complex, in the millet complex, in the rice complex, all of which account for this 2.4 billion demand, which we are basically demanding from outside and transferring our jobs and giving our jobs away, and having a 2.1 million people unemployed in our own locality and community. And the big issue is how do we finance infrastructure? And we think we found a way around it. Because if it's possible then to create these agri-ecological zones as special purpose vehicles, then those entities themselves can borrow on a long-term basis concessional funds that allow them to do the roads and so on and so forth, and basically add it to their business model with some kind of grant component
that allows the entity itself to become profitable. Because I think Dan's point is right. If you charge infrastructure on a private sector balance sheet, you're basically inviting the killing of that balance sheet. But I think if we do it in an intelligent way with a mix of grant and also a mix of concessional funding, we should be able, through the SPDs that will run
or own these agri-ecological zones, to be able to fund infrastructure and be able then to provide the requisite services and throughput that allows the farmers, the aggregators, the industrial producers on these in these zones and parks to become profitable, to expand output, improve their yields, adapt technology, and allow us then to become not only increasingly self-sufficient, but also a major exporter within the sub-region and also beyond within the AFTA environment. I'm sure you've heard of this before, but the important thing is that we have to be focused. And for me, if we can get the private sector to be working, give them all the tools, all the funding that is available, all the enterprise support, all the project preparedness and investment readiness, then in that sense, we also begin to address the problems of risk and also begin to see that they have an opportunity to thrive and grow this economy beyond fiscal consolidation. In a society that is determined to fiscally consolidate, it will just disappear in its own consolidation. We have to find a way out of this consolidation, and that consolidation must be anchored by agriculture. It is true that the budget doesn't gives nominally 1.5 billion, but if you add up what the Trade File Secretariat is trying to do in terms of raising about $1 billion for the private sector, and also the big push, as has been mentioned, which is about, I think, 13 billion, and other components, together with all the grant components and all the different MasterCards and so on, if you aggregate them and we do it in a focused, concentrated manner and outside the silos and more in an integrated fashion, I think we'll all begin to see results, and we'll all begin to measure together those results and the metrics that we are achieving, so that we can basically be assessing where we are at any point in time on this road to transformation. Personally, I speak for myself. If we don't transform, we're going to go much more deeply into a hole, and we'll be back at the IMF in no time, another 18, 19, 20 times. That doesn't speak very well of us as educated people, because the resources are here. The human capital is also here. We need to join together and make that happen in a way that is beneficial for our children. Somebody told me, and I'll end up here, and I felt very insulted. He said, after looking at the Galamsey pictures, he said, you people don't care about your children. I felt terribly insulted. But when I thought about it, I said, yes, he's right. How do you sit down and have your water bodies destroyed, your environment totally compromised, and are unable to arrest a situation that potentially can create so much disease, so much crisis? Not only that, jettison the ability to even be food self-sufficient or even achieve levels of export revenue that historically we have been able to achieve. Because if we don't think about the next generation coming after us, and those that are with us now, then what is the point of all our education, all the PhDs and fancy stuff? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Gusitano. Just acknowledging the presence of Honorable John Dumelo. Can we put our hands together as he's joined us today? So I'm going to come to you, Kofi, the financial services sector. We've spoken about the establishment of the Gold Board. What are your thoughts on this? Your own thoughts, and also representing the sector. Will it help with stabilization of the currency or anything else?
I think, and these are my thoughts.
Please go ahead.
These are not industry thoughts. I think the small-scale mining sector needs to be organized. And to the extent that the Gold Board can do this, while ensuring that price discovery, demand and supply are all market driven, as opposed to state planned, I think it will be successful, right? Definitely, we need a small scale mining sector. We call it Galamsey, but if it was organized, licensed, people were trained in a way that made sure that the environment was being well taken care of, I think that could be a boon to this country. The people who are in that sector are in it because they need to eat.
Yeah.
So the jobs that it provides are essential to the extent that we're not destroying this environment. The fear is that once set up, it becomes a tool for government to manage pricing, to establish things that are not market driven. And if we do that, if it goes in that direction, we've seen different kinds of centralized boards all across West Africa. Cocoa Board was not the only one, right? I believe it's the only one remaining. Most other countries, they're gone, and they're gone for good reason. You cannot state plan these things and make choices around where prices should be set and who should win. You should let the market do that. If the gold board brings rationality to that sector while allowing market forces to prevail, I believe that it will be successful. And we need some organization in that sector. So given that caveat, I'm supportive.
Okay, great. Hifron, coming to you, public financial management. Where do you think we've gotten it wrong in the past, and how can we get it right going forward, looking at the provisions in this budget?
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you. Yes, I think for every strong economy to thrive, is based on a very strong public financial management system. And I think as a country, we have been very good at, passing the laws. In fact, Ghana's PFM law is seen as one of the best in the world. But I think our issue has been the strict enforcement of these laws. You look at the waste and the indiscipline in the system. I mean, for example, why do we start a project, go all the way, to a certain point, and then only to realize that, in fact, we didn't conduct a comprehensive feasibility studies on that project, and we get, to store. This project gets stored, and we have to come back to the tax, payer to cover additional, financing so that we can start another project. We construct roads, and within a year or two, these roads are not fit for purpose. And the Minister of Finance come back to us and have several measures to get us to pay more. So the issue is, how strictly are we enforcing these PFM laws and regulations? And I think in the minister's budget, he's even proposing to review the PFM Act once again, so that he can put additional measures to strictly enforce, the various provisions that we have. So if we don't take steps to cut those wastes, if we don't take steps to ensure that whatever systems we have put in place is actually working, then I think we'll be back to where we are once again, and possibly more troubling. If you look at this budget, I think there is that push towards, fiscal decentralization. A lot of money are moving to the ministries and then also to the funds. And one of it, if you look at the ECS budget, has to do with the Capping Act 947, where 54 billion is being allocated to these statutory funds. And in this budget especially, we're seeking to transfer the full allocation to these entities. Now, the ministry at the same time have published, strategies to streamline the operations of these EMA funds entities. And if you look at the issues that, was outlined, one having to do with governance, issues that have to do with spending on non-core activities, because these statutory funds are given specific mandates. And instead of applying those ones to the mandate for which they've been set up, they actually spend these monies on non-core, expenditures. We have issues again in the strategy that the Ministry of Finance, published as part of the IMF, conditions, issues around collateralization of the receivables. In the period about the 5 years since the passage of the Act, you have close to, debts accumulated to about, 30 billion out of the total of about 81 billion that during the, from 2017 to 2022 was allocated to these statutory funds. So if now the uncapping and we're going to give them full allocation of their allotment, then it's important that, we pay attention to these governance and commitment control issues that have been outlined. And if these things are not strictly enforced and we make sure that we're cracking the, waves, then we'll be saddled with, these huge debts that we find ourselves. So if you look at the measures that have been outlined by the Minister of Finance, is also in line with the IMF, program to make sure that the procurement law is reviewed, to have an independent office, to actually an independent value for money office to actually scrutinize some of these procurements. It is again proposing to also tighten the procurement law with respect to having commencement certificates before projects are undertaken. So there's quite a lot that in this budget, the operationalization of the compliance decks within the Ministry of Finance to monitor reports with respect to commitment control and adherence to arrears and debt accumulation is critical. But I think as a country, our big problem has to do with the strict enforcement of these PFM laws. If that can be done, I think we should be fine.
Okay, great. Can I put our hands together for the panelists? I'm going to come to the audience now to ask a few questions because time is fast spent and I know we're all dying to ask some questions. So if you could raise your hand, a microphone will come to you. I also have some questions that were sent ahead of time, which I will ask as well. So if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand. A microphone will come to you. You can mention your name and the company that you're representing. Whilst you do that, Honorable Minister, I think this question is going to be for you. The person is asking, when is the COVID levy going to be abolished? I think that's something that a lot of people want to know the answer to. And maybe we'll take another one. With Ghana's projected GDP growth slowing to 4% in 2025, what role do you see industrial diversification playing in sustaining growth? Honorable Minister, I'll come to you whilst we wait for others to ask questions. COVID levy, the role of industry in sustaining growth, and any other comments you want to make, and then we'll go around the next set of questions, which will come to the other panelists. Thank you. Could we pass the mic to Honorable Minister Setekbe?
Yeah, thank you very much. As I said, the COVID levy is a classic example of how we were using levies to respond to in a counter-cyclical way to respond to crisis. COVID was a very major crisis, and the shutdown and other things, deepened, the crisis. And so the introduction of COVID is a classic example of what I meant by using levies, to respond to such crisis. which should have gone after COVID. Let me give a very practical example of a very advanced country. During the global financial crisis, we all knew the US started virtually best sense and others went down. Financial institutions, there was contemplation for some of the big banks, to also go, down. The Fed, which is the equivalent of their central bank, stepped in and bought many of the securities that were creating problems for the financial sector. Fast forward, when those securities were put back on the market, and I hope that when we put back our securities after correction, it could happen. The Fed made a profit of about $3 trillion that they passed on to the Treasury. The US Treasury, this was covered by Bloomberg, so I'm sure if you Google, you'll get it. The US Treasury actually kept the $3 trillion as a counter-cyclical fund. And that is what made the US more nimble when COVID struck. Unlike the confusion and state of unpreparedness during the global financial crisis. That was a fund which the US used actually to start the research which gave us, the solution, which is the COVID vaccines and the rest, so that the discovery was done very fast. That's the use of a counter-cyclical fund. Our equivalent is a stabilization fund. Hopefully, we will minimize even the rate, of such levies, or eliminate them if we let the stabilization fund, operate, better. Let me do a quick one on. I think one of the agric is cross-cutting, and it's so cross-cutting to the extent that you will notice that the name for the Ministry of Trade is now Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Agribusiness. And therefore, I think Guzi mentioned the value addition elements. There was an allusion to Exim Bank. Value addition means we must look outward. Value addition, the chocolates and things which are being done, provide the financing. The Exim Bank is a very critical intervention, which must be allowed to look outward. And our Exim Bank has one classic example, advantage, in that the ED fund, what used to be the agri fund, which became the agri and export development fund, is providing the CD requirements. It's a levy on imports. So Exim doesn't have to borrow, right? Exim is taking over those funds to support agri industry and the rest. And then Exim banks are classic in the sense that you ring-fence exporters, and we can start with the big ones who are exporting, provide them with, the credit facility that they need domestically. The repayment is ring-fence in the form of forex through their correspondent banks, which is why Exim banks hardly have, the best example, as I used to establish to give when we're doing the Exim bank, this cocoa board. Cocoa board is the Exim Bank for the cocoa sector. So the Exim Bank will be the Exim Bank for the non-traditional sector, export sector, and hopefully it could even expand into, maybe by the time cocoa comes back, gold exports, it's exports. So you can see the question on gold board and its functions. You could see the gold board doing the mobilization, and the exports could be through Exim Bank, for example. The policy is coming out. I don't want to preempt anything. The law is going to Parliament. But I'm giving this as an example of the value chain and how you need financing. There's no emerging economy. There's no brick economy that developed without an Exim Bank. And for us, we are borrowing from all of them. Korea Exim, Turkey Exim, Benendez, or Brazil, which is called Exim Bank, and the traditional one, the US Exim, China Exim, right? And Exim banks, by virtue of the syndication which Cocoa Board was doing, have very good ratings. You may want to Google even whilst we are here. The ratings for China Exim is AAA. So it's not true that all the money for China Exim, which they use to give us loans is coming from their government. It's coming from Western markets. They borrow. CDB ratings, similar. So I think this is the sort of linkage, that we need, and the cross-cutting. When you do rural rows, like the cocoa rows, is supporting agric to reduce post-harvest losses, and the rest. If you do dams, and if you look at the big push, I think there's a list, which His Excellency in one of his speeches. If you do some of the dams which, are mentioned in the big push, to the extent that you use them for irrigation and others, the water basin and the rest, they support agric, and so we need to look at the cross-cutting nature of it to see, the support which agric will get, in addition to the big one for agric, which is the farmer services centers, which is also, like Cocoa Board, going to be an aggregator, pulling tractors, as His Excellency was saying, instead of distributing them and they get lost, old mechanization, So that is what I have to say. And my last quick points, deficit financing. Yes, it's not just about high interest rates and the rest, but we know that government market activity can even bring the central bank down, as we are seeing now, and we have to recapitalize it. The last time we recapitalized our central bank was during ERP SAP. If you're in the banking sector, there was something called a non-performing asset recovery trust, impact. So that experience we are living, 30 years, down the lane. So I think I'll take I'll give the opportunity to others.
Okay.
I can respond to other questions.
Thank you very much, Honorable Secretary. So, if you have a question, please raise your hand, and the mic will come to you. But I'm going to pose a question to Honorable John DeMello, if you don't mind, sir. Honorable John DeMello is a member of Parliament for Ayawaso West Wogon and also Deputy Minister for Agriculture. So this is an agriculture-related question, sir. So in terms of youth engagement in agriculture, what is your opinion on the budget's provisions to attract young people into the sector? And do you think the incentives offered will be enough to drive significant change?
Well, thank you so much. Yes, with the budget being read, there's a lot of hope for the young ones to get into agriculture. For us at the Ministry of Food and Agric, this time around is more action and less talk. Even though the budget has been read and is yet to be approved, we've come up with so many programs, of course, like the famous Nkokon Kiti Nkiti program, where we are going to distribute a lot of poultry to over 55,000 households across the country, so that we sort of reduce the imports of poultry. Also, we are doing the irrigation for wealth creation, where we are going to have land banks, and with the land banks, we are going to give out land to the youth who want to get into agriculture. And of course, we are going to irrigate those lands for the youth. And so it's an exciting time to be a farmer. It's an exciting time to be in the agribusiness space. And then also we have the farmer service centers, which this year we're going to build 50. And so if you need any technical information, if you need any help, you can easily walk to your farmer service center and get all those information and the equipment. And for us, it's about feed Ghana and feed the industry. So first we're going to feed Ghana. Second, we're going to feed the industry, where we're going to add value to all the things that we produce. And then the third one is to export it so that we can reduce our import bill. And so, like I said, it's an exciting time to be a farmer. It's an exciting time to be in the agribusiness space. And hopefully also, when the women banking is incorporated, we hope to also give out very
low interest loans to the women, especially the young women who can also get into farming. And so these are some of the few things we are doing at the Ministry of Food and Agric. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I put our hands together for him, please? So still questions, you can raise your hand. A mic will come to you. There are two questions here. I think Madam Nora wants to make a comment briefly before the questions come. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I wanted to add very quickly, because I was dwelling a lot on the lowering of interest rates. I wanted to add that the positive steps taken by government to remove certain taxes is a very positive gesture. However, if government is to give us incentives and then there are no controls, for instance, to deal with unfair trade practices, to regulate imports coming into the country. I mean, no matter what support government gives us, if we do not control what is being imported from all over, competing unfairly with what we manufacture here, manufacturers are going to be left with produce that they cannot sell. And some of these practices include under invoicing. It also includes finished products that are coming in that are listed as raw materials, and so on and so forth. So what we suggest is that, again, I said it before, that government needs to sit with AGI. We need to have a deeper conversation, you know, to get all the answers. And also there's that downside, you know, of the budget, what was read to us. There's that 21% VAT that we pay, and yet we are only able to claim 15% of it, leaving about 6% as a form of tax.
Yeah.
All of this increases our cost of production, making us uncompetitive. And also we need to be focused on looking at reducing the cost of energy for manufacturing.
Yeah.
Because the products coming in from China has a lower rate for energy, has overall, it's a lower rate for labor.
Okay.
You know, ours is higher for many reasons. And this is why, although I didn't want to talk about the betting tax, it's a form of discouraging the youth from staying focused, you know, in seeking jobs. I just have to say it, because I've been an employer for over 4 decades.
I didn't want to talk too much about it. There may be good reasons for this, and that's a conversation that we can have.
All right, thank you. So we'll come back to you. We have 2 people waiting to ask questions.
Okay.
So I think, say the gentleman here, please, if a mic can, do you have the mic? Or the mic is here. Okay, we'll start with you, sir. Then we'll come to you. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Eric Esubonten. I work in the mining industry. I'm Logo Dashanti. My question probably goes to the Honorable Setepe.
Ghana, as a mining destination or investment destination, has been losing its attractiveness to other countries in the West African sub-region, particularly Cote d'Ivoire. If you take your mind back about 5-8 years ago, Ghana was probably the leading destination for exploration investment.
As we speak now, we are probably number 3 or 4 in West Africa, and that is an indication of where the industry will be 8, 10, 15 years down the line. And that's mainly because of unpredictable fiscal environment and so on. So this question goes back to the GSL that has been increased from 1 to 3%. Most investments will probably take 15 years to recoup. And so some of these will not have been factored in, and all of a sudden it comes in and it changes the dynamics altogether. So our attractiveness as an investment destination for mining, we're losing that. And so I just want the Honorable Setepe to address whether government, in introducing this increase, considered the impact on the attractiveness of Ghana as a mining investment destination, and if so, what is it going to do to help balance that? Because as we speak, you talk to most people and they are eyeing Cote d'Ivoire in particular. They are not, actually, offices are being closed or have been closed in the last few years, moved from Ghana to Cote d'Ivoire.
Okay.
So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And maybe I'll take a couple more, then Honorable can address the ones addressed to him. The gentleman here, please, can the mic come to the gentleman here? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Sylvia Fan. I'm the founder and lead for Bush Partners. We mobilize and invest diaspora investments, diaspora capital into Africa. So this is a question to the Honorable Minister, Tekpe, the former Minister Tekpe. At the moment, we're dealing with a few things. We're dealing with a huge infrastructure funding deficit on the continent, 1.6 trillion USD, and I'm sure there's a significant gap also in the Ghanaian case. In the same breath, we're dealing with aid, which is falling globally, right? In an age of leaders like Trump that are basically looking inward, we shouldn't expect much more money from the West. In the same breath, as a matter of fact, there is, in my opinion and factually, an audience that is very much willing and able to invest in Africa, which is the diaspora, right? And I am also part of the diaspora. I'm a Ghanaian, but I was born and raised in Amsterdam. I used to live in London, moved to Johannesburg, and I've been back in Ghana for a few years. At the moment, the diaspora sends back over 100 billion USD per annum, right? And it's an amount that has been growing since 2010. In 2010, diaspora sent back 37 billion USD. Today, the diaspora sends back over 100 billion USD officially, and these are official figures, right? So these are not even the full figures, right? You would know as well as I know that official figures are not always the real figures, right? Because cash transactions are not recorded under the 100 billion. So this tells us that there's a huge opportunity in the diaspora in financing budget gaps, specifically also infrastructure gaps. At the moment, countries like Ethiopia have dabbled into diaspora bonds, right? Ethiopia has done 2 diaspora bonds to finance infrastructural projects, but also renewable energy projects, right? With recently the GERD project, and even most recent, Nigeria, our neighbors, they have been able to do a diaspora bond, 300 million USD, which they got out of the diaspora, right? They issued it in 2017, and it matured in 2022, which was paid back, and it was a successful case, as much as it wasn't full diaspora that invested into it. It tells us the opportunity in the diaspora. We mobilize and invest diaspora investment into infrastructure, renewable energy, and financial inclusion. From the public point of view, the public administration point of view, what is the plan to both attract and make it interesting, or make it conducive for the diasporans to invest in an economy like ours? Since there is indeed a willingness to invest, there's capacity to invest, and it's not just from people like myself who are Ghanaians who happen to live outside, but also African Americans and other continental diaspora and historical diaspora. So what's the plan from government to indeed attract and make conducive investments out of the diaspora? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Honorable, maybe you take those 2, and then we take another round of questions. We're running out of time. I know we have to finish off here by 11, 10 minutes left. So let's keep our questions brief so we can get as many in. Honorable.
Yeah, thank you very much. The main distraction for us is default. The default that we had and the haircuts, which affected, the bonds. I don't know if you were in, so at the risk of repeating myself, Ghana actually issued, a dollar bond, and even though we did not call it at the time diaspora bond, much of the bond was taken by the diaspora, $200 million US. I mentioned it earlier on. Back when we were doing the smart borrowing, it was an experiment. It was the first experiment. And we had a condition that it's a dollar bond, but you cannot go to the Forex Bureau to change money and come and buy the bond. You must prove that you have a bank account. And you agree with me that most of the diaspora funds that are coming in into the country go through the banks. And so there was a huge, take for the bond. We cut it at $200 million, as we said we would. And even though it was oversubscribed to about 400 million, because we wanted to remain faithful. And the plan was actually to use that money into self-financing, projects. And we thought that we had the proof that we could actually do dollar-based self-financing projects, and which are dollar-denominated, and pay back, in dollars, create a pool. Currently, the flows go to increase our reserves. I think anytime BOG, gives indicators on the reserves, the forex flow from the diaspora is an element of it. But the plan was, and it followed, the use of self-financing for the pipeline first, the pipeline that connected and bringing gas, the gas processing plant was self-financing. The latest were the two examples, let me be quick. As I said earlier on, was the airport terminal 3, which is financed from airport tax, which is in dollars. And then the port expansion, which is financed without government guarantees, from the various dollars that are paid for demurrage, shipping fees, and the rest, which was ring fence, both what was going to the consolidated fund and what was being used. And those gave us those projects. So the idea was if we could do dollar bonds as part of the market, we could continue to do self-financing where we channel it to projects that generate dollars and can pay back, in dollars. I would hope that we can bring this back. And I'm talking about, 9-10 years back, before Ethiopia, and the examples that you are given. I did a tweet in which, I highlighted the Cote d'Ivoire challenge, because Cote d'Ivoire is set to become a middle-income country, better than Ghana. In its Article 4, which was published by the IMF, a very interesting one, we can Google and see. Quite apart from some of our fields, our investors for energy going next door. But I think the solution also lies in the determination of His Excellency to bring those investments back. He's been mentioning it because they have invested already partially, but they've left, especially the two big ones. So if we can get them back, we can win the confidence of investors again, back to making Ghana, attractive. And the inflow of oil from the two oil fields that are stranded now is important in resolving our debt crisis, just as we used oil through the stabilization and sinking fund to take off the first sovereign bond. In fact, we used Ghana's oil, $550 million of our own money to buy back the first sovereign bond, the 2007 bond. In fact, 200 million of that amount was used by the past government on maturity, October 4th, 2017, which is 10 years, barely a year into the administration. Yes, if we look at, some of the funds, DACF and the rest, now capping can be directed, into effective borrowing, to backstop and to do municipal, metropolitan and even district, projects, markets, lorry stations, pavements and the rest. And if you don't pay, I mean the subnational governments, there will be a backstop for the repayment of the fund. That's the extent to which we were going to do a proposal to do the municipal bond bill, which hopefully, when we have resolved some of the challenges, we can. The effective thing is for the markets to see that you have a plan for repayment, including the diaspora, and you get the money. That is what, Ethiopia, Botswana, Cote d'Ivoire, and the rest are practicing. We started in the last 15 years or so before many of them took up the challenge. And these are specific examples, which I am giving. So hopefully we can resolve, the problems. That answers the question on infrastructure financing. The other element of infrastructure financing was giving the loss of concessional financing and grants. We channeled those borrowing into social infrastructure. If you recall, the hospitals, the hospitals that were being built, yes, there was some loan, commercial loan, but it was a mix. And the reason is that you have 25 years to pay, even if you are losing concessional financing, to pay from tax, revenues through the amortization. But when you borrow 6 years, 5 years, including PPPs, where government has to be strong, then you can only use commercial borrowing. But the project, if well targeted, can pay, for the project, including full or partial financing of highways through tolls, you mentioned and your assent shows, which is done to maintain infrastructure. All you have to do is to get the E-Pass, assuming it's the US, which can make you travel all the way from, Virginia to Massachusetts. The states just, distributes, and that's what they use to maintain, the highways.
Honorable, if I may interrupt, the first question about the mining sector. Yeah, because we're running out of the mining sector question, yeah.
The first question was, sorry.
He wanted to know about the attractiveness of the mining sector, how we're going to restore it, because Ghana's mining sector is no longer as attractive as it was about 10 years ago. Cote d'Ivoire is competing with us. So that gentleman wanted to know what are we doing to make ourselves more attractive for mining investment?
Yes, there's solutions to Ghana. I'm saying in particular when you take gold, creating a more formal, means of exporting the gold. That's the gold board that is being, proposed. Structuring well, hopefully running it better than, Cocoa board, and then linking it for private exports to the initiative on Exim Bank, which will provide both the domestic financing as well as the, funds for exports, which then can be ring-fenced for repayment, for raw materials, for, industrial, whatever infrastructure that private sector, may need, to set it up. So that is the plan for that. And linking it to, in the case of Agriga, we discussed earlier on, the Farmer Services Center and other such initiatives.
Yeah. And then the 3% increase in the GSL, because I think that's also hitting them quite hard.
Yes, I hope that we can go back to what I said. Our taxes were rationalized to make for the pillars, and anything else should have a purpose. Even the excise duty has a purpose. That's why they are called state taxes. Import duty has a purpose, protection. And therefore, if we want to introduce any levy, and we set a sunset clause, we should set it and let it go, and hopefully that would happen. ESLA is a good example of a levy that was supposed to last 3 to 5 years. The money came in, we collateralized, we didn't apply it, and today it's hanging. And we can, because of the crisis, we may not be able to take it off immediately, but hopefully we'll come back to sunset clauses where needed, for the levies that we introduce. They should have a purpose. In the case of the ones that support, downturns, perhaps the stabilization fund will minimize the levies. And that is if we are faithful to, let the stabilization fund play its role. That's the counter-cyclical fund, which is also the one supporting the sinking fund.
Okay, thank you very much. We have time for one more question. I think, Michael, your hand was up. You take a mic to him, and then, unfortunately, we'll have to wrap up. Okay, you can take. Okay. My
thank you very
senior
much,
partner has allowed me to take more questions. So Michael, go ahead, and then two more.
Thank you very much. My name is Michael Kobla. I work for Synergy. 3 very quick points. I don't know how we missed the ESLA, the application of the ESLA funds for us to accumulate so much debt in the energy sector. And if we don't fix the problems and the challenges in the energy sector, the 24-hour economy will be a charade. So we need to see how we can plug that very quickly. I also don't understand how you mentioned clearly that the airport financing, the $400 million financing was done without any government support, so is VRA, so are other parastatals. I don't know how we land all these parastatals who can borrow on their own individual strengths into the basket. So anytime that you needed to borrow for expansion or infrastructure for some of these critical infrastructure, you have to go to IMF. So I think that in renegotiating the IMF position, we should look at how we can take out some of these things. Now, in my mind, the investments that we need for agriculture, we don't need to look inward. I know that 10 years ago, the UAE said that food security was a very major challenge for them, and that they were looking to partner countries in Africa who they could collaborate with them. If they could demonstrate that they had the land banks, they could come and partner with them, and they could even give them offtake agreements. So they'll bring in their own investments, do all this irrigation we are talking about, and then give you an offtake, you grow, you process, and you export. So I don't know why we are not, as a government, partnering the UAE to look into these interventions. We don't have to do it ourselves. We don't have to look for the resources ourselves. I mean, if we cast our mind back and we go into a right partnership, we'll be able to attract the necessary resources. But we have to demonstrate that we have done our homework well. The land banks are there, free of litigation, and we can attract these foreign investors to come in and assist. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think 2 more questions, and then we'll call it a day. There's one at the back, and there's one to my right. Okay. All right, you have the mic. Okay, please, you have the mic, sir. You can go ahead, and then the gentleman at the back will go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, is it working? Yeah, okay. Thank you. My name is Jürgen Erke of GIZ, German International Corporation. And I wanted to ask about an additional long-standing issue that has been raised in the budget speech, which was VAT reform, addressing the issues of non-deductible levies, for example, and basically, yeah, taking a closer look at value-added tax. Now, I would like to ask whether the Honorable Seth Turkber could give us, or could let us know whether there are already any details out there on what are the government's plans from the representatives of the community, what their perspective is on VAT reform. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Gentleman at the back.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm also from the German Development Corporation. My question goes to also Honorable Secretary. So basically, everybody in here, I believe, has a TIN number, and we've graduated. You know, it's been linked to the Ghana card and all that. The issue about broadening the tax base, drawing in the informal economy. I feel that governments, successive governments, are not, nobody wants to take or do the hard work to draw in the informal economy. And so every time we are talking about broadening the tax net, it has become a cliche. And when I look at the budget, I don't see that kind of, that effort, because there's a whole lot of money in there that government can tap. But it seems that it is not going to take just 4 years to really mobilize, you know, the framework and the resources to get money from that sector. And so because it's not going to take 4 years, no government wants to take the chance. Honorable, I want to seek your thoughts. I mean, what is government going to do in that direction? And I love what the PFM expert said, you know, on the SOEs. They are becoming a drain on the budget. And I'm happy that the president has, you know, made some remarks. But I just hope that it is not just the rhetorics. We need to get them to work. We need to get them to start making profit. They cannot continue to drain the budget and reduce our fiscal space, monies that we need to spend on critical sectors. These guys are just wasting them down the drain. And year in, year out, government is pumping money in there. My third issue has to do with the standardization of the collection of property rates. Now, in Ghana, we are practicing decentralization, but everything is from the center. Is it the intention of government to really empower the MMDAs to really collect these property rates by themselves? Or again, we are going to collect these monies at the center and redistribute to them?
Okay, thank you very much. That was 3 questions in one. Thank you very much. Before Honorable Secretary comes in, now I'm going to ask Kofi a question, because I think we've ignored the financial services quite a bit. So digital transformation in the financial services sector. Kofi, what are your thoughts on the implementation effectively? Are there challenges you see as being able to do so going forward?
If we look at digital transformation, I assume you're talking about it from the consumer perspective.
Yes, sir.
We have a number of fintechs in the country right now who are doing quite a bit of work. But if we really want it to take off in the way that I think it should, we need to think about rationalizing the regulatory environment. You've got right now 4 key regulators in the financial services sector: SEC, NPRA, Bank of Ghana, the Insurance Commission. Mm-hmm. A lot of services have to straddle one sector versus the other. And up to this point in time, most of the fintechs are forced to focus on just one. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to think about how the straddling across different sectors, because in the end, you're serving a customer, you're providing a number of different financial services
Right.
to them. I think those digital financial services, if we're really looking for broad-based participation of every single Ghanaian in the funding of happening in the country.
Okay.
Today I sit here as a pension fund manager, primarily because most of our funds are coming from the formal sector through payroll.
Yep.
That's what is available, and that's what we're hoping to use to support the policy objectives of government in this environment where there's so much contraction, both from the monetary and the fiscal. All financial services providers need to really be supported so that which money is coming from. And like the gentleman over there said, there's a lot of money that is not being mobilized towards what can happen in this country. So I think we really need to look at that.
Thank you very much, Kofi. Honorable Seth, as I come to you, I want to add my own question as well. The Women's Bank, it keeps coming up. People have also asked, when is it going to be established? How is it going to be done? What is going to be different about it? And why should women be excited about the establishment of a Women's Bank? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I missed the point on GIZ. Let me.
I was talking about the VAT reform.
Oh, the VAT reform.
Yeah, and then also to get your thoughts, but also the general business community, which I think we'll do during networking, but to get your thoughts on how the VAT is going to be reformed. Right, sir?
Yes, thank you very much. We're going back to do, what we did with GIZ. The issue is, and let me link that to the question on the informal sector and all that, and to the digital question. Government needs to go digital, which is what we started with doing for the tax systems. Until we get an integrated domestic tax, system that links to the integrated customs system, which is ICAMS, it will be difficult for us to do tax compliance. I highlight digital because ICAMS was phase 2. ICAMS West Blue, however you may want to call it, was phase 1. ITAS was to be phase 2. And let me give a good example, one very critical example. We have so many apps and others which are doing things for GRA, like the VAT invoice and, registration databases, and the rest on the domestic side. They are disjointed. The invoice, the VAT invoice, which we do not call VAT invoice, is a customs entry because we import raw material, we import machinery, we import finished goods. And so the domestic input as credit and domestic and the export refunds that are claimed on VAT, the validation of those claims for refunds and input as credit are sitting in the customs system. And they need to be downloaded into the taxpayers' domestic tax office system to validate whether the credit being claimed or whatever, evasion and avoidance, particularly with the levies increasing the rate of the tax, of the VAT, domestic tax, are true or not. So we're missing a very important compliance tool. There are those who import, but they are small. Medium, and the operations on the domestic side, may be evasive. And this is where the tax ID number, business ID number becomes relevant because they are sitting on the customs entry. You have to use that for the declaration. The addition would be tax office numbers, which can link this so that no matter what the business you are doing, the VAT invoice, that's why we talk about it as the audit trail. Because my sales invoice is your purchase invoice, the one buying from me. They are linked. And that's why we call it the invoice credit method. So I think the reforms on ITAS is very critical to a resolution of many of these things. And we have been talking to, we started discussions with the World Bank, with the development partners, and through the steering committee. I believe that once the minister has some, breathing space, there will be the round table again, which we had, which led to outcomes and led to, even on the expenditure side, the controller is not the human resource manager for governments. But just because they issue clearance, everybody blames the controller. The human resource managers for government is the Public Services Commission, Office of Health and Civil Service, Education Service. All that the controller needs is where you are on the payroll in terms of your wages, salaries, taxes to be deducted, and all that. That's what the controller needs to make the payments, the information. So the initiative to strengthen the HRMI system that we established, procurement similarly to interface with the GIFMIS. And more importantly, the question on strengthening, PFM question, which I missed earlier on, we must introduce semi-accrual, because we are not in full control of arrears payments, we are not in full control of contracts. There was a contract that was financed by GIZ, USAID very early and they fixed together, which was to interface the GIFMIS, for expenditure management. We've been talking a lot about tax and that's a concern, but expenditure management is very important, how we handle contracts. Because if you award a 3-year contract, this is what His Excellency mentioned when he says pipeline of projects. If you award a 3-year contract, and at the end of the first year, the remaining 2 years should inform the budget allocation for the medium term, expenditure allocation for the ministry. And once it has reached the limit of allocation, you shouldn't be awarding new contracts, right? You should finish the road contracts and the rest, which are already in the pipeline, before you move on to the next. And these are some of the things which, again, back to digital use. You can't do these things physically, but it was an experiment that was started. So I think wiring government and making sure that, to use the old expression, and making sure that, the systems are linked, in which in Korea they call the digital brain or D-brain. Everything goes into the fiscal system, and through that you are able to see and monitor the economy more efficiently and prevent problems, on the monetary side. I discussed ESLA, already, and how not to handle a tax that was introduced called a nuisance tax, which should have gone away like all nuisances, but which is dogging us, almost 10 years on. Yeah, it was introduced in 2015. It was supposed to go to last 3 to 5 years to clear the energy sector debt. And the energy sector debt is still a problem. ESLA is still a headache, for businesses, because it goes into the calculation of VAT in particular. And it's what we call, cascading. So all these are very important. Property tax is very important. What we were missing is a land valuation board role, which was to value the property before, the property rate amount, is applied and collected at the district level. It could be collected together with GRA, because much of property tax, actually, with the transformation taking place, is not from household residences, where you have, in many districts, there are family properties who pay, maybe the patriarch is gone and the rest, but commercial property. And GRA collects the rent on many of those properties. So this is where the synergy, between the subnational government or MMDAs and the GRA, which is in almost has offices in almost every district, capital, comes in. Again, therefore, if you are able to connect the two, which we were doing with the fiscal decentralization under the World Bank, with the GIFMIS, and then do similar on the revenue side, ITAS extension of MMDA, GRA need not collect. Those who collect at the district level can be provided with the information, on valuation and others. And now we have GPS location and others which can even enter into a database, for the collection. So ITAS, very important. Moving the country to semi-accrual based on accountants forum is also very, critical in order that we avoid the budget, overruns that lead to deficit financing, borrowing, and all the things that have plagued the economy.
Okay, there was also the partnership with the UAE on investing in agriculture.
Yes. The truth is that if the country defaults, the country's sovereign rating follows it to any financing. And so usually you will see that, yes, the investors come and, and because we are a developing country, there's a government element to almost every investment. And they end up asking for guarantees and for other, once they understand, the true situation of the country. In any event, yes, UAE may have, like Saudi, their sovereign wealth fund, right? Which in our case, the sovereign wealth fund instrument for borrowing is the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. So ideally, they should be able to come to a Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund if it's able to reinforce its revenue and have its own ratings for borrowing, instead of that of the state. But so long as, it's linked to the state, it's often very difficult. They may look attractive. We have a lot of them coming, but they also operate in the market, and the sovereign ratings bring the project, ratings down, and that is why often it does not materialize. So the states need to bring its act together and its SOEs. We cannot go to the market for cocoa bus syndication, which was doing so well since 1993. That's how far back it was established. And the syndication has been going on until recently, and it was beginning to get some of the best rates, LIBOR plus 2-3%. But today it's gone, so sustainability of these measures are very important. PPP, we should always remember, is public-private partnership or private-public partnership. The P, which is the public, must be managed well to make the P, which is private, work efficiently.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can we put our hands together, everyone? Thank you so much to our panelists. We had Mr. Dana Kwe, Honorable Sir Tekbe, Nora Banaman Abbott, Hefron Abuaja, and Kofi Finn. Thank you so much for your time. I know we were not able to discuss everything, but we'll continue the networking as we end today. I'm going to hand over to my partner, Richard Ansong, who will close us out. But I think we can put our hands together as our panelists take their seats. So after you, ladies and gentlemen, or lady and gentlemen, you may take your seats. Go ahead. Can we put our hands together, please, just to appreciate them for their time.
All right, thank you, Aisha. I think they deserve another round of applause. I have a big book here. I've taken a number of notes. Unfortunately, I cannot talk about them all. So I believe you do also have a number of questions on your mind. Please keep them coming in. We will do well to forward all that to the appropriate people to respond. There have been a lot of discussions. Clearly, agric continue to be on the mind of a lot of people. We've talked about funding for infrastructure. AGI says they have capacity. How do we make the 24-hour economy support that? Definitely, businesses also have a role to play. There are opportunities in the budget. And an interesting question around the funding, we also need to be prepared, ensuring that we embed ESG into our business processes to be able to attract the concessionary loans that the government is trying to facilitate, especially for the 24-hour economy. But in all this, you don't need to do all that by yourself. That's where PwC comes in. We call ourselves community of solvers. We live to solve problems. And Honorable Seth, you can be assured that PwC would continue to partner government to ensure that we build the better Ghana that we're looking for businesses, Like we indicated, we are always available to support you on this journey, and you can continue to count on us. On that note, if there are no further questions, we want to thank you all, both our audience in-house, our panelists, and those who join us online. We are very grateful. We do not take your time for granted. We'll continue to work to support this country. Together, we are all involved in building this nation together. Thank you.